Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and joining me, not always as always, as you may know from the Professor Zach Meckler being with me just the other day, but resuming his usual role, I was going to say like the Paul Hogan to my something, maybe the crocodile to my Paul Hogan, you know, Mr. Crocodile Dundee, Mr. Crocodile Brian E. Roach. What's going on, Brian?
I cannot be the crocodile. The crocodile gets killed. Paul Hogan kills the crocodile with a giant knife. You are not. No, this is terrible. This is the worst insult ever.
You know, Paul Hogan, he needed a buddy, like for a buddy movie. Crocodile Dundee needed a mate. And I know we have some Australian, we have some people from Australia to listen to the program. So, I mean, maybe they have something because I think he was like more popular in film down there and, you know, had a few things that hit stateside. Obviously, Crocodile Dundee being the big one. And, yeah, I don't know. We were stretching for something for today. And, you know, Brian, you know, he's old and leathery, kind of like a crocodile. So I kind of thought that fit.
All right.
All right. And he's crabby sometimes, too. So the shoe fits. You could always be Oscar the Grouch, but he doesn't really have it. You know, it's not quite Bert and Ernie there either. So it's not going to work. So we'll find something. I'm sure we're going to get some suggestions on this, or people are just going to say, get on with the show. And yeah, we're going to do that.
Stop
today.
the bromance.
Oh, there's too much bromance. This is my brother from another, my older brother from another mother. So.
Mom likes me best.
You know, I have a great story about that. Like when I was in high school, and there was I had a teacher that had the same last name as me, Kuzma, right? So I'm like maybe a sophomore, junior, like about 16 years old, right? And this guy was entering his final year. I had him actually as the final year that he taught. And he was actually a second cousin. And, you know, so he's like 60-some years old, silver-haired guy, you know, stuff like that. And people always used to ask what my relation was to him. I never told them that he was a second cousin. I always used to say, that's my older brother. Yeah, you know, Dad used to like really get around. So, and you know, he was in on the joke too, which was actually quite fun. So just a little side note of my personal life. Today we're going to talk about some old people as well, Brian. Yeah, well, some of them, I think. No disrespect to the Steelers Hall of Honor, but that's our topic of discussion today because it could be announced pretty much anytime. We're just kind of waiting on it. They've done it at random times, you know, throughout the last couple of years. And this is going to be the third one that they're doing now. So these are in alphabetical order, but I think we should, you know, run down real quick the list of the who's who of Steelers Nation here. And let me see. Let me rewind. This is how you get in the Hall of Honor. Okay, so it talks about all these things that they do. Okay, former players retired for at least 3 seasons. Must have played for the Steelers for a minimum of 3 seasons. Should possess noteworthy career highlights, records, and achievements. So, you know, as we name these names, then there's former coaches and contributors. It just says significant contributions to the team and community. And that'll be important later on as we mention some other names as well. So, you know, when they first, everyone that goes in on this gets this solid steel football, which it actually replicates the original given to Steelers founder Art Rooney Sr. by the U.S. Steel Corporation and the United Steelworkers back in 1982, and that was to celebrate the team's 50th anniversary. And then each of the Hall of Honor members, they're recognized with a plaque and a steel football and a special display located inside the FedEx Great Hall at Heinz Field, which I don't know if they took out the one beer spot that I liked, but it's okay. I think I can cope with that. They still have the like the kind of walk of fame or whatever deal too with the locker room stalls. So it's kind of interesting. You have a Hall of Honor. They kind of had a pseudo Hall of Honor before that. And there's even maybe a name or two that are on display with these, you know, kind of mocked up locker rooms with an old jersey or helmet or cleats or, you know, some type of memorabilia in it that aren't necessarily on this list. So getting on with it, these are the current members of the Steelers Hall of Honor. And we're going to talk today about who's missing from this list so far, and how many can go in this year, and whether they do this every year. But they've already announced they're going to do this again this year, so that's why it's a topic of discussion. And first off the bat, Jerome Bettis, obviously, big time running back, Super Bowl champion. He was one of the inaugural guys. Rocky Blyer went in last year. Mel Blount, Terry Bradshaw, Jack Butler, Dermontti Dawson, Buddy. Yep, Dirt. Buddy Dial goes in last year, wide receiver, 1959 to 1963. Had a lot of, for not being a very pass-happy league, guy had a lot of receiving statistics for that era. Bill Dudley, a halfback in the 40s. Alan Faneca went in last year, still not in the Hall of Fame, though. This is what more or less, right, Brian, like the inaugural class was like pretty much if you were in the Hall of Fame, you're in, which made sense. Now you're getting into some of the guys that might not be there just yet. Mean Joe Green, Kevin Green, L.C. Greenwood, Jack Ham, Franco Harris, Dick Hoke, John Henry Johnson, Walt Klessling, garden tackle, and also a coach. We're talking about like when the team was instituted. Basically. Kiesling. I'm sorry. The font on their website sucks ever since they changed this. So, we always have that problem. There's like these websites where you go to where an I might look like an L and things are misspelled. I've even seen it on Twitter with like this weird site that has Steelers and they spell it with like an I just to trick everyone into thinking that they have Steelers in their name. It's quite bizarre. Anyway, Jack Lambert, Bobby Lane, John Blood McNally. You may have heard of him once or twice or many times. Legendary. I mean, some of these guys like even predate you, Brian. I can't help it. You know that. You have the advantage, though, when we start talking about some of these names, because I was born in 81. So I did, the most I get is like through, clippings or highlights, or if I happen to catch some old film or something, I have to go by everybody else's word on some of these guys. I don't for this one. Chuck Knoll. Or this guy, Bill Nunn, or these guys, Art Rooney Jr. and, Art Rooney Sr., Dan Rooney, of course, Andy Russell, Donnie Shell, John Stallworth, Ernie Stautner, Lynn Swan, Mike Webster, and last but certainly not least, my main man, Rod Woodson, my hero growing up. There's a bromance right there. I can't even hide it. Some people are like, oh, you do this show and you do this and you cover the Steelers and that. You really, you shouldn't be like a fanboy. Nope. Rod Woodson's around. You've seen it in person, Brian. I like turn into a small child.
The real 26.
The real 26. Absolutely. Hey, we may have another 26. Isn't Barron looking to maybe wear 26, or he used to wear 26, I think? Newly signed Mark Barron. Go for it, right?
Sure. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, it's available, so if not him, it's going to go to one of the undrafted rookies. So anyway, I don't know if you want to lead this off. There's a bunch of names that aren't on here. Who's your big? Well, okay, go ahead.
I tell you, if they rectified. I'm just going to, because I vented about this 2 years ago. I vented about it last year. I'm going to vent about it one more time, even though it's been fixed. The fact that Bill Nunn had to wait a year annoys the hell out of me.
Agreed. Very much so. That was actually quite surprising.
It should have gone in the inaugural class. I know they wanted to cut things off, but everybody on the committee deserves a big smack in the back of the head. Okay. That being said, I don't want to vent about it too long, every time we see this, it annoys me. The thing is that you're starting to get because of the restrictions that are there, which is that 3-year time frame. We're now at the point where we're starting to get a lot of guys who are more modern day players that deserve to go in. So the question ends up being, how long do they wait on some of these guys? And how many guys do they try and go in? Now, they had talked about 3 to 4 guys every year, but last year they did 5. Whether or not they can keep it to a minimal amount. Who do you pick over who you don't pick? Should a guy who is likely to be a Hall of Famer go into the Hall of Honor before he goes into the Hall of Fame? Happened with Alan Faneca, so I guess there's a precedent there. But you've got guys kind of in that mold, and I'm gonna start because he's eligible and because I nominated him through the Steelers Nation Unite site with a guy that I just wish we still had in his prime. One, Earl Heath Miller. This is the greatest tight end in the history of the team. He deserves to go in.
Yeah. How can you not? I mean, even for a tight end, Heath Miller is up there on a lot of the franchise statistics as far as receptions. I don't think he's as high with scoring, but he's definitely there with like receiving yards and games played and starts and things of that nature. I mean, there's just so many guys. There's such a rich history of the Steelers that, you know, unfortunately, if you're like 13th in something, it means there's like 12 guys in front of you and there's like 11 of them are Hall of Famers and maybe one of them is, you know, another guy I'll throw out here real quick that's in the same kind of group here. Hines Ward. 1,000 receptions, and you know, it's a lot of people debate whether or not he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer. I think he's like a fringe guy. You know, I don't know. Like, you know, Hines is certainly he has longevity off of the field as well. You know, Dancing with the Stars, and he's still, you know, one of these TV guys. You know, the smile. You know, the hard hitting Super Bowl MVP. I mean, I think those are the things, the intangibles. Like, you talk a lot of times about some of the guys in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You talk about, you know, I never had really any doubts about, like, Terrell Owens or Randy Moss or, you know, there's always some questionable, like Terrell Davis as running back, a little questionable. But, I mean, you look at where Hines was when he retired and, you know, who had more receptions than him at that time, just a handful of guys, and all of them are basically Hall of Famers. And there's some that are in that have even less accolades than what he has as far as Pro Bowls and being a 3-time All-Pro and things of that nature. You know, Heath doesn't necessarily have that. I don't think Heath will ever be a Pro Football Hall of Famer, but as far as the team is concerned, absolutely. This is a guy that I believe this year, I mean, may have more modern flavor to it. And they just had, like, you know, the reunion with a lot of the players. Was it the Super Bowl 40 team again this time? Or yeah, I think it was Super Bowl 40 team this time that just reunited. Yeah, it would have had to have been, right? It could have been 43. It could have been 43. Now I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, it was 43. 25 years. 43.
Oh, you know why? Yeah, because Jeff Reed was there. So yeah, okay, so, you know, and James Harrison, you know, got the cheers and jeers and whatever. Hey, how about that though? James Harrison coming out in support of Big Ben, huh?
Oh yeah.
I mean, hey, here's this guy. He's trying to mend fences. Hey, you know what? You're helping. You swayed me back towards you, James. Now, you know,
to be named again.
To be maybe named again. A little too soon for the Hall of Honor, I think, for James Harrison, but all-time sacks leader. I think he eventually, time heals all. I think he's a guy that goes in. Antonio Brown would be a guy a decade from now that we would still be discussing as to whether or not he should be. So it's like when you're in the moment, you're like, you know, really angry, like it is a bad breakup or a bad marriage or something of that effect. So I don't know, like James Harrison hasn't been retired 3 years, so he's not eligible yet. That's one thing. So when he is eligible, perhaps time will have healed, and if he continues saying the right things that we like to hear him say, as opposed to, you know, venting about, well, he still took a shot at Tomlin, but I digress. So, hey, you know what? Well, we're on the topic. One more guy now that's going to have to wait because, you know, he was sitting, and I thought he was going to try and accrue his 3 years and get into the Hall of Honor, but just got signed by the Raiders, is, you know, the GOAT, Landry Jones. So, unfortunately, we're going to have to wait on that one, too.
Yeah, that's not happening. The GOAT of backups is not sniffing the Hall of Honor.
That's a shame.
I know you're upset. I know.
I'm terribly distraught.
Not going to happen.
Darn.
So you brought up Hines Ward. I want to say this about Hines, and I've said this before. You know, yes, many people view him as a fringe Hall of Famer. I don't. He's a solid Hall of Famer. There's never been a blocking receiver like Hines Ward. I might look. You get some of the statistics. He's got the stats to be in. You have a rule change based on the fact that you broke a guy's jaw.
Yeah. No.
You know, are the you know, he just deserves to be, and it's not even, in my mind, it's not even questionable. It will take him a long time if in fact he ever does get in, because receivers are hard to push into the Hall of Fame. But it's, to me, he's not a questionable entry. He absolutely belongs in, and he absolutely belongs in the Hall of Honor. I thought he might have gotten in last year because he would have been eligible. So I think that he could very well be a no-brainer for this year's class. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
I want to troll you so bad, you know it. You can just sense. You can just sense that I want to say Neil O'Donnell's name.
Cursed! The curse has been no.
Yeah, that's one of those things. No, that's the reason why I said Hines Ward. You know, I'm not saying he's a fringe guy. I'm saying that people view him, or the reason he's in limbo right now. He wasn't even a semifinalist this year. No. I mean, Faneca was. You look how hard it is for the linemen, the guys who actually do most of the blocking to get in, because it's just something there aren't numbers and stats and things attributed to. And Hines has done that in addition to the numbers. Just his numbers weren't as gaudy because, you know, face it, they ran the football. You had the bus too, you know. I mean, and Fast Willie Parker. Don't forget about those guys. Even Mendenhall came out and had some words for people too, which was like, you know, wow. I mean, this is getting a little crazy. I mean, you're getting a little bit of flavor from everybody around here. But you know, moving on and speaking of goats, got a couple of them here that are going to pop up here in the list, and probably none any more deserving, except for the fact of whether or not he would show up for the ceremony at this point. Mm-hmm. A little bit of bitterness, talk about time needing, you know, to heal and mend fences, Troy Polamalu. And I think that's going to be the main sticking point here is, do you put a guy in that may not be there to accept the award? I mean, there's no doubt about Troy he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. If he's not, that's a crime. I'm sorry. We'll find out shortly about that. But I think he definitely belongs in the Hall of Honor. There's going to be a spot reserved for him. Whether or not that spot is announced in 2019 is a whole different story.
Yeah, I mean, this is my impression of this. You know, Troy. Troy was my bromance for so many years that I can't even, you know, I can't even speak to it. There's no question, first ballot Hall of Famer. This is a guy that should go in the minute he is eligible for the Hall of Honor. And he's eligible this year. I don't think he was eligible last year. But I can't remember whether he's 3 or 5 years now. I guess he's 5 years now, isn't he?
Let me check on that.
You know, if he's 5 years, then he would have been eligible last year. And I guess, you know, I can sort of accept that they didn't put him in last year, but he should go in as soon as he can go in. And if he doesn't show, he doesn't show, but it's also a way to show respect for what he provided. And maybe that begins to mend some fences with Troy, who, you know, as most of us know, did not really like the way his Steelers career ended. But that's often the case. And this is another, hopefully time heals all wounds. And, you know, there's just too many things to talk about with Troy Polamalu and the way he played the game, and that there really wasn't another player that you could look at and say, oh, yeah, that's what Troy was like. No, Troy was one of a kind. And that's why he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and that's why he should be in the Hall of Honor ASAP.
Yeah, ASAP. I mean, 2014 was his last season. I always get, you know, mixed up on that. I almost said 2013, you know. So the first year he wouldn't have been eligible that they did this. Last year he would have been. So that's interesting to see. You know, like you said, there's the precedent with putting Faneca in before he made the Hall of Fame. Some of these guys, you know, aren't going to be in the Hall of Fame. So I don't think that's necessarily any type of rule or exception whatsoever that they would just wait for Troy Polamalu. You know, I also thought of this much in the same way of, and some people will joke because I know I get the yucks over the pro wrestling stuff, but the WWE Hall of Fame that they do, it's almost like they like to have like a headliner, but, you know, for each class. So somebody might not go in this year because they want to hold off next year, and they, you know, it's something they sell tickets to, and there's speeches, and it's a TV event and everything like that. Steelers aren't doing anything like this. There's like a small press conference and that, and you'll have all of these guys come to a game and you know, basically be recognized at like halftime and stuff of that nature. So I don't look at it as, okay, well, this year we can't put Hines, Heath, and Troy all in at the same time. baloney.
Right.
In fact, I was mind blown in the first year by how many people they actually did put in all at once. They just decided, let's do them all.
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason they can't. I guess if you want to say Hines has been retired the longest, he should go in. And here's the thing: this is a team that's rich in culture, right? This is a team that's rich in great players. This is a team that's rich in people who were not only influential for the team but influential in the league. And not all of those players are ever going to be in the Hall of Fame. And a lot of those players are going, and contributors of various types, deserve to be in the Hall of Honor. I'm going to throw a name at you that I didn't put on our list when we were doing pre-show talk.
Okay. I wonder if I have it on my secret list too.
It could be, because double yoy.
Oh yeah, I was gonna save him actually for last after we went through all the players, because is there anyone that's a more significant contributor to Pittsburgh Steelers lore than Myron Cope? I mean,
yeah,
longtime broadcaster, inventor of the terrible towel. You can't get any better than that.
No, it aggravates. I can see him not going into first class. But it aggravates me he didn't get in last year. And so if you don't put Myron in this year, what are you saying? I mean, first of all, he was the voice of the Steelers for a long time, but forget all of the rest of that. Terrible towel, man. Terrible towel.
I know. And it's a thing where it's the Pittsburgh Steelers kind of radio network and things of that nature. And if you've ever been to some of these other Hall of Fames, or even I went to the Cincinnati Reds baseball museum that's attached to their, the Great American Ballpark down in Cincinnati, right? Mm-hmm. And this was a few years ago. I've actually been to it twice. That's just how amazing a culture, because they were one of the first baseball teams, maybe the first baseball team ever. Don't hold me to that, sports people. I'm not a baseball guy, but I am intrigued by history with certain things. And, they definitely had spots for broadcasters within there too, and so I mean that's one of those things where I believe a few folks, Myron Cope above all, I mean definitely, yeah. But Bill Hillgrove eventually I think is somebody that should be recognized. You look at some other teams that I follow. I mean, like Mike Lang with the Pittsburgh Penguins, Joe Tate with the Cleveland Cavaliers, retired a little while ago. What is it? There was the guy with the Dodgers that just recently stepped away, and they did a big thing for all these longtime broadcasters that have been doing this stuff for like 30, 40 years, and they're a voice of the team, and they help get everything across to people who may not visually be seeing it, and their voice is literally etched in certain moments of history. You could picture certain players throwing touchdown passes or picking something off or fumble, or Troy Polamalu. I mean, can you picture a Troy Polamalu highlight maybe without like the voice of Bill Hillgrove behind it? I mean, right. It's absurd. And when you think of Myron, not only the terrible towel, but things like bongles and things like that. He's still, even though he hasn't been with us for a while, he's still endearing to fans. I mean, when I was down in Jacksonville with the whole tailgate deal this past November, there was a fan who did a quite incredible impression of him too, and he was talking about going after the kitty cats or whatever he called the Jaguars. He did it as best as Myron would maybe do. So yeah, Myron, Myron's big on my list, and you talked about bromances and crushes with Troy Polamalu. Yeah, he's the 1B to my 1A with Rod Woodson. He kind of replaced Rod for me. Here you go. Here's one that I think is one of your big ones, right? Greg Lloyd?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy who had the numbers, right? I mean, sacks have only been a stat since, 82? So it's like you don't really get – the 70s teams kind of get shafted on all the 60s and 70s and all that. They get shafted on the sack stat. Is there enough archival film to go back and have somebody from Stats Inc. or something actually go and do this type of thing? I don't know. I don't know how that works. Can't they retroactively get I would love to know the sack totals for some players. But, yeah, Greg Lloyd, I mean, we were talking about James Harrison being one of these guys that should be in when the time is right. Greg Lloyd, the time has been, I think it's right now, because as you got through the first two waves, it was like what you said was, the first wave, the first inaugural class was everybody that absolutely has to be in, NFL Hall of Famers, this and that. The second wave is like, okay, these are the guys we missed the first time that we had to say, sorry, just wait a year. Now we're into, here's some guys that are definitely key contributors, and his running mates in there already with Kevin Green. Obviously, he's a Hall of Famer, but Greg Lloyd definitely belongs in there too.
Yeah, you're talking about a guy who was a 5-time Pro Bowler, 3-time first-team All-Pro, was a 2-time MVP of the Steelers. He's iconic. All right, Greg Lloyd is iconic in the history of the franchise. As I was not hired for my disposition. Part of that whole thunder and lightning process with Kevin Green. There was probably, and Lloyd is never going to be in the Hall of Fame. He doesn't have the stats to be in the Hall of Fame. It took him a little while to get started, but once he became dominant, there really was no more intimidating person in the league at the time when Greg Lloyd was in the league. He's beyond deserving to be in. The question just becomes, when does he go in? There is. And I want to focus, of course, on the field stuff, but Lloyd had some off the field issues recently that could potentially stop them from saying we want to highlight you right now, and bring you in as the guy in an initial class. But eventually he's got to be there.
Oh, I agree. I mean, we have some pretty amazing names, actually, that are going to pop up over the course of this program, and we'll just stick with the defense and almost around that era for the same period of time. I'm sorry, maybe not in the same era, but we've got some guys that are mostly 90s and 2000s players as part of this, and there's a whole slew of them on the defensive side of the football. The big snack, Casey Hampton, Aaron Smith.
Don't get me started. Because I'm going to go. I'm going to go about Aaron Smith.
Go for it. Go for it. Shoot for the stars, buddy.
Aaron Smith. Look, you're talking about a guy that, in my opinion, is Hall of Fame worthy in Aaron Smith. The problem is, because he was a 3-4 defensive end, he's never going to get the notoriety that he should have gotten. But without Aaron Smith, that defense doesn't work.
We've seen it. That's why they initially fell apart, because it was like Ziggy Hood was the maybe heir apparent. Aaron Smith had the health issues and stuff, and then kind of prematurely retired. And I think a lot of people they miss that. That's how Woodley and Harrison and these guys had a lot of their success as well. The big snack and Aaron Smith, and then pair him with whoever else was on the other side. I know Kiesel was part of that transition there too. Chemo Van Olhoffen was over there at some point. I'm drawing a blank on some other names, and I may not have the timelines all mashed up, but you get the idea when you have two Pro Bowlers like Hampton and Smith on that front line, and then that allows those outside linebackers to just have a field day, man.
Yeah, I mean, look, Aaron Smith was the epitome of a 3-4 defensive end. He ate up blocks. He got penetration. He caused disruption. He did things, and he was so solid at closing down the run and holding, his end. Just I could bromance about Aaron Smith for hours, but I won't. Him and the big snack, look, and there's Casey gets in because there's no better nickname. The big snack, big giant Casey Hampton is the big snack. He should be in. He also was really, really good, and in my mind, the problem being, of course, that nose tackles don't get the same respect either. He wasn't going to get the stats as a nose tackle, but he could eat up 3 guys as blockers and free up everybody. He was that good. Again, Casey Smith, much like Aaron Smith or Casey Hampton, in my mind, should be considered for the Hall of Fame. Probably will never get in because of the position he played, but he was that dominant.
Oh, I agree, and I mean, this may be a hot take, but a lot of people they fawn over Aaron Donald or Ndamukong Suh or any of these guys. I mean, Casey Hampton, definitely, he's in that conversation. I'm sorry, he may not have like the sack totals, but this is a guy that was eating up entire offensive lines. Like you said, put him over there with Smith and anybody average or above average as the other defensive end, and they were tearing it up. And it's unfortunate that they this is how the Steelers defense fell apart. We've talked about this before. It was like Smith got hurt, Hampton got old, Woodley got a big contract, got hurt, Harrison also got hurt, and then was a cap casualty, and just I mean, it wasn't just old; it was also not having enough reinforcement. You can't plan for. It's like losing Ryan Shazier. You can't plan for losing some of these guys. They couldn't effectively plan for losing a guy like Aaron Smith, and then also having to replace some of these other Pro Bowl and or All Pro talents on the defense. I don't know. You may not put some of these other guys in the same category. A Carnell Lake, definitely he's a contributor also as a coach as well as a player. James Ferrier may be one of their best free agent signings ever. Levon Kirkland, another inside linebacker. I mean, there's a guy that was a hoss. So, I mean,
you just got to watch. You got to go back. If you never saw Levon Kirkland play, you're talking about a 300-pound linebacker.
Yeah. He's huge.
And he was just massively huge and so fast. I got the chance to meet him at a signing, and he's still a big guy. And we talked a little bit, and there was no linebacker like Levon Kirkland when he was there. And you're not going to see a guy like that anytime soon, because in this NFL, he'd be playing on the D line. I can't even imagine, but he was so fast and so quick and so good. Unfortunately, again, underappreciated, but also just go back and watch him destroy some people because it's fun.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, Kirkland is one of those guys. He's a name that I grew up with, and so he definitely, sits in my memory. Especially, you're talking about. Well, we'll get there in a second. 92 to 2000, you start piecing some of this together. 94 to 03 for Jason Gilden, another name that doesn't necessarily jump off the page so much as Joey Porter. Now, Joey Porter is another guy. If you're going to say Greg Lloyd goes in and James Harrison deserves to be in, Joey Porter's right in there too. How does that work now? Is there any hard feelings over him, being not renewed as a coach? I don't know. So, but Porter belongs in this conversation as well.
Absolutely. Joey was, he was the mouth, man. He was the heir apparent to Greg Lloyd. From that dominating, disruptive personality type. I'm not saying he took over directly, but that's the kind of presence he had. Look, hey, got into a fight with the Cleveland Brown on the bus or a Raven on the bus or whatever, I can't remember now, but Joey is Joey. Coach Peasy, I don't know how that fell out with them, and whether Porter ended up being a scapegoat for the defensive woes, or whether they really weren't happy with the way he was coaching the outside linebackers. T.J. Watt developed under him. We all need to remember that. So, there certainly is evidence that he wasn't doing a terrible job. And I know everybody's going to talk about Bud. Bud's a different animal.
Yeah, definitely.
So, who knows? And the defense changed during his time, as the outside linebacker coach. So we'll see. But just as a player, he absolutely deserves to be in. No question about it.
Yeah, I mean, 60 sacks and 3 Pro Bowl trips and an All-Pro trip now. In the same breath, I'm going to throw a name out here. We actually discussed, but we didn't put on the list, but you jogged my memory now about Mike Merriweather, 3-time Pro Bowler in the 80s, and he sat out that year in 88. Here's a guy that, I mean, it's even to my, I was maybe 7 years old at that time, so it's something that I'm learning from the history books as well. I didn't grow up knowing that. Longtime Steelers fans will remember that this Le'Veon Bell type thing isn't the first time this has happened. Even Rod Woodson has had spats, and Hines Ward and some of these other guys. So I don't know if there's any hard feelings or anything there with Merriweather. He had one big season where he had 15 sacks, and I mean, it was the 80s teams. I mean, what else can you say about that? But I mean, Porter definitely. Going through some other names here, Brian. I mean, we've got some. I got some surprise ones. Maybe you were talking about maybe some old timers that you wanted to bring up. The one two that jump off the page of the ones that you named here, LB Nickel and John Cobb. I mean, I think those guys, why not? I mean, they should be in there. And then you have a few others that you wanted to name as well that, that's when they were wearing the leather helmets and, you were maybe a teenager going to the football games.
You're so funny.
Well, I try my best.
Yeah, look, the one that I think has a real solid chance of getting in as a senior member, because I think they're going to try and certainly recognize some of the guys who were on the team in the past and essentially did good things, but we're not. They unfortunately they played on losing teams. They played when the Steelers were not good. But that doesn't mean they weren't good. And LB Nickel is one of those guys as a tight end. Before one Earl E. Heath Miller showed up, he owned all the tight end records. LB Nickel had some of the best seasons as a tight end. And you're talking about a guy in the 20s and 30s, or the 30s and 40s, actually, because he was born in 22, so he didn't play when he was 1.
Yeah, okay, I got it.
But
the 40s and
50s, yeah, the 40s and the 50s. I can't add. Give me a break.
Brian has the original retro jerseys.
I'm old. I do not have those. Look, I know it will come as a shock. I didn't get to see LB Nickel play.
Oh, that's a shame. I was really going to draw upon your experiences there and see what you thought. I mean, there's a lot of names that we're probably going to skip over or just aren't in our immediate memory when it comes to these contributors and that. Even some of the old time, coaches or people within the organization. I was going to say I was going to come around the end of this with Myron Cope, but you already kind of spoiled it for me. But I have a couple of others that, I know you didn't put on the list. We've discussed, and I retain them to my memory. But I have some others that I didn't. And I kind of wanted to go around to, I was doing this Mount Rushmore stuff like a year or two ago or, for every decade. And I go through a few decades. We're talking about like recent history. And I don't know that he's a guy that's a this year guy, but he may be a guy in the future. You talk about contributor, you talk about the culture. There's nobody that really ignited. I think he probably sold more jerseys as a rookie than anybody, including to a young fan of his and myself, a / Cordell Stewart. I don't know what you think about that one. It might be a bit early for that based on some of the other names we have here, but I think that's a guy that eventually you got to say, you put him in like, you got maybe another one that's like a fringe, like a Santonio Holmes that's been more active with the Steelers recently and is a Super Bowl MVP. I know Cordell doesn't have some of those accolades, but I mean, hey, his slash antics and the gadget plays and stuff like that, that's one of the reasons they were successful, early on there. And they got into the Super Bowl and whatnot. And unfortunately, he who shall not be named, the quarterback edition of that kind of spoiled all of those things. But there's two more guys here. I kind of wanted to go into the 80s, and I didn't want to necessarily be a troll on everything that I say today. So I'm not going to mention like Mark Malone. I'm not going to pull out Bubby Brister. But there's two guys here that are definitely deserving and even of this year. And I'm going to say wide receiver Louis Lips. And kicker Gary Anderson, who was probably the only bright spot if you look over the entire decade. I mean, he really shines, and he's leading scorer and everything else. So I think Gary Anderson should be one that's definitely considered.
Yeah, I was holding my two special teams guys that I think deserve to be in. Gary Anderson was one of them. I want to say this about Cordell. Remember, Cordell was the offensive player of the year. In 2001, AFC Offensive Player of the Year. He was a team MVP in that same year. Cordell, is because he who shall be named shall forever be banned from anybody's lists. And it is dead to me.
Rhymes with O'Connell. Rhymes with O'Connell.
Yeah, whatever. Don't even tempt the fates again.
We'll call him Larry Brown's meal ticket.
There you go. Cordell is my number 3 all-time quarterback on the Steelers. So he, in my mind, yes, at some point he deserves to be in. Are there people who deserve it more than Cordell? Yes, there are. So he may have to wait a little bit. But there's no question that Cordell deserves to be in the Hall of Honor. Was he the greatest quarterback? No, but he was exciting. He changed that position and really paved the way for guys like Michael Vick, and showed that a running quarterback, a flashy quarterback, a guy who could do more than just be a pocket passer, had a place in the NFL. And I certainly don't think he gets credit for that as much as he should, because everybody thinks Michael Vick started it all.
Well,
not the case.
Yeah, and then you have losing in the AFC title game, and he had some bad experiences. He was also benched, and then he fought back from that and that adversity, and even just how he became a starter, so to speak, was always, I think, kind of controversial because of the way he entered the league and converted from quarterback to wide receiver. Now it's like, oh, we're going to take this guy and be a quarterback. But I mean, Cordell, you're even looking at the outside, like kind of off the field, and it was really cool because I think I mentioned this like a year or so ago, but he was on the cover of like video games and stuff. I mean, he was a pop culture phenomenon, and maybe one of the more during that period of time, more than anyone else, when the Steelers didn't have one of those guys that you would want to put on the side of a cereal box or something like that. That's who Cordell Stewart was. So I think he's someone that definitely should get this kind of recognition at some point. We talked about Gary Anderson, 3-time Pro Bowler. I was going to look up Louis Lips here too. He was basically the wide receiver in the 80s.
Yep.
Trying to bring this up here. So from 84 through 91, 8 years in Pittsburgh, 6,018 yards receiving, 39 touchdowns, 2 Pro Bowls right out the gate, though, 84, 85, as soon as he started in the league. And, that 84 team is the one that lost in the AFC title game, too. So, we had some crossover in talking with some other players. I got some other favorites. I'm going to leave those off because then we're starting to scrape some of the bottom of the barrel. But I think I have two, Brian, that there's one that's without a doubt got to go in this year, and there's one that will go in, and it's just the question of when. The question of when is one Mr. Bill Cowher. I've been biting my tongue saying his name the whole show because a whole bunch of these players are all being talked about because of Bill Cowher and his job as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The other is already in the Pro Football Hall of Fame and should probably have the recognition of going in a second time as a coach, and that's Dick LeBeau.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up Coach Dad myself, because again, you're talking about an innovator. And again, you're absolutely right. He's in the Hall of Fame as a player, not a Steelers player, which is why I don't think he got in the first accruement of things. I think that most of the bad feelings about the way Dick LeBeau left are gone. There's been, people have, he's been back to Pittsburgh for a couple things. I think you are absolutely right. As a coach, it would be as a coordinator really more than anything else, LeBeau deserves to be reinstated again for those contributions to the NFL. The inventor of the zone blitz, the guy who came up with all of these incredible ways to give these players the best chances to do what they do and take advantage of their athleticism and their skill sets. Andy read the Night Before Christmas every year. So, Coach Dad, Dick LeBeau, absolutely. He should go in ASAP to the Hall of Honor. He is worthy of getting a second induction into the Hall of Fame as a coach. I will say this about Cowher. I agree with you. There's no question he deserves Hall of Honor recognition with the Steelers. He's a Super Bowl champion coach. He took them to a lot of AFC title games.
Yeah.
And was really a guy who resurrected the franchise to a certain extent, and gave it some validity during a time when it was experiencing its downturn. So he brought it back from the doldrums, so to speak. And I'm not even going to give you my second special teams guy, and the reason is we'll save it for another show. And it's because I don't want to. You got two good guys to end with here, and I don't want to cascade down from that high. Coach Dad is too much of a high.
I still had a couple of them, and they're not necessarily the one is probably deserving and also a broadcaster, and then there's a couple of others that are the fringe kind of guys. And if you start to just think about history of the team and stuff like that, yeah, more than likely they're deserving as you get into like 5 or 6 years of doing this. But I think for all intents and purposes, yes, I would like to see Cowher and LeBeau right now. Maybe Gary Anderson or Lewis Lips, but if you had to really pin it down, Heath, Hines, Troy, Greg Lloyd, those guys got to be in there right now. I think we could wait on, Gilden or Porter or Kirkland or Ferrier and some of them. I think an LB Nickel or John Cobb are guys that belong. Myron Cope definitely belongs. Lewis Lips, Gary Anderson, those guys belong. But yeah, if you're going to say, there's no finite number, there's that you're going to pick to put in this. If you had to pin it to like 5, Cowher, LeBeau, Heath, Hines, and Troy. There you go. I'll do it that way. And if you say Troy isn't going to show up, then give me Greg Lloyd or give me Myron Cope. We're just assuming now that since Myron hasn't been put in for a year or two, maybe there's something with the broadcaster thing. I still think he has to be an exception to the rule. He's almost like, for me, he's an off-the-field Mean Joe Green as far as, when you're talking about Mr. Steeler and retiring jersey numbers and stuff like that. Myron Cope is on a pedestal all of his own when you're talking about off-field kind of contributions in light of all the people that aren't in there as well.
Yeah, I was gonna throw that at you. Give me the 5 guys you think are going in, or the 3 to 5 guys, because they may not do 5 this year. They may do 3. They may do 4. We'll have to wait and see. I think if I am putting my guys on the my 3 to 5 guys, LeBeau, Hines, I'm going to say LB Nickel, and I'm going to say him because I think that they will do a throwback of some kind.
That's fair.
And Myron Cope, and then Lloyd. Yeah. And I'm not leaving, even though I nominated Heath. Like I said, I nominated Heath officially. I'm not even putting him in because I think you can say that I think he deserves to go in, but there's so many people, and I think if they put guys like Lloyd in and somebody like Hines in who probably has waited longer than he should, then Heath has to wait another year, because I think it's maybe, if it's not his first year, it's his second year of eligibility for the Hall, and they can certainly wait a year, but I don't have a problem with them putting him in. So that's my number 6 is Heath.
Well, yeah, and you know what? There's a guy you could hold off on. That's why I was kind of like biting my tongue. I'm like, well, Greg Lloyd should really go. I mean, we're all, Troy definitely should be there. Here's one thing I'm going to leave you with, this kind of note. So, can you put a coordinator or a position coach in over the head coach he coached under first?
Ooh.
I mean, do you put in Cowher, or you put in LeBeau, or you put them both in at the same time? I mean, just think of it that way. It's a little interesting.
LeBeau transcends coaches, though. He was a coordinator across multiple coaches. I think. The one question will be, I guess, when was he last a coach? Not just for the Steelers, but when did he last coach in the NFL? Because it hasn't been that long. He was with Tennessee for a couple years, and I can't remember when his last year was.
He didn't coach last year, so 2017 was his final season.
So he may not officially be eligible.
But I think that might only be the player end of it. I don't really know.
Might be.
But, I think they make this up as they go along, and to be honest. So, I mean, and that's fair, too. I mean, if someone's deserving of honor, then they should be in the Hall of, quote, honor. So, well, yes. Brian, I think we've hammered this out pretty well. So we'll see. I'm sure our listeners have a few ideas in their head, and there's definitely someone that may have had sentimental value to them that we totally glossed over. And then we're going to probably look at each other and say, you know what, you're right. So bring the comments in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe as always. And until next time, thank you, Brian. His name's Brian. My name's Joe. Yeah.
I was going to say, just please keep he who shall be named out of the commentary.
His name's Neil. My name's Joe.
No, it's not.
Until next time, we encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.